Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we're jumping straight into something that completely flips everything we've ever been taught about studying. I mean, have you ever spent hours upon hours just cramming for a test only to wake up the next day and realize you've forgotten almost all of it? Yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating feeling. But today we're going to explore a framework that totally shifts how we approach learning. We're going to see what happens when we actually start aligning with human evolution, instead of constantly fighting against it. To really understand why our typical study habits just kind of fail us, picture this scene. A student named Henry Hildebrand is sitting in chemistry class, and his teacher delivers these absolutely cutting words. "Henry, if you fail this exam, how are you going to survive medical school?" I mean, ouch, right? Imagine being there. It's 11:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, the classroom is quietly giggling behind him, and this massive wave of fear and anger just hits him. He had literally been studying for weeks. It's this incredibly painful, frustrating reality that so many of us share, right? Putting in the hours, doing the grueling work, but still just failing to retain the information. Sitting there, he genuinely felt like he just wasn't smart enough to make it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because in the aftermath of that failure, Henry realized something really profound. He figured if putting in relentless effort alone doesn't guarantee success, then what actually does? He realized that if hard work wasn't the answer, he needed to dig deeper. Maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't his intelligence at all. Maybe the problem was the very way he was learning. So he went searching. He started diving deep into research papers, looking not just for some cheap study hacks, but for a genuine biological understanding of how learning actually works.
And you know what? That obsessive search led to a massive, totally life-changing aha moment. He discovered that the brain is not built for modern education. It's built for survival. This is just such a powerful realization. This entire time, his failure wasn't his fault. And hey, it's not your fault either. No one is too lazy or too dumb to achieve high academic success. The real issue is simply that none of us were ever taught in a way that our brain intuitively understands. We're trying to use a system that is fundamentally flawed for our own biology.
Now, what's really interesting here is this stark contrast. Modern education was essentially invented during the Industrial Revolution, right? And it had one clear goal: to produce as many efficient workers as possible. So learning became standardized, highly measurable, and super rigid. Facts were stripped of any real-world meaning and treated like bricks in a wall, just meant to be stored away. But contrast that with our evolutionary brain. That was shaped 35,000 years ago out on the open steppe. Its mission wasn't to memorize a textbook. Its mission was to keep you alive. When you hear a rustle in the tall grass, your brain has to act fast, survive, and actively rewire its pathways so you respond even faster the next time. Our brains are built for active adaptation, definitely not for passive storage.
So to fix this massive disconnect between our biology and our classrooms, Henry developed what he calls the river method. This is a learning framework that perfectly mimics how our evolutionary brain naturally absorbs information. Basically, instead of viewing your brain as a dusty storage unit where knowledge is statically installed like bricks in a wall, you need to view knowledge as a flowing, living network. It's a river. Information doesn't just sit there. It flows, it intertwines, and it permanently reshapes what is already inside your mind.
So the crucial point is that to ride these natural currents of your mind, you really just need to follow three core pillars. Step 1 is recall. Step 2 is connect. And step 3 is transform. These are the exact principles our ancestors unknowingly used to survive for thousands of years, and they form the absolute foundation of this natural evolutionary strategy.
And what I absolutely love about this method is how incredibly actionable it is. You can absorb vast amounts of knowledge in a really simple, highly precise 10-minute cycle. You spend exactly 2 minutes on recall, 3 minutes on connect, and 5 minutes on transform. That's the whole shebang. It's a mathematically precise daily method that saves you from hours of frustrating memorization and turns learning into a quick, targeted biological process.
All right, let's look at step 1, recall, or activating the search.
Have you ever gotten completely lost in a new city without Google Maps? Or worse, you actually use maps and it takes you to some sketchy dead-end alley? Raise your hand if you can vividly remember the sheer panic of exactly where that happened. Well, why does that memory stick so incredibly well? Because when you get lost, your brain enters a highly active state. It faces an unsolved problem, so it frantically starts searching for all possible helpful clues to solve it. Your brain essentially wakes up.
And that is the power of open recall. You need to test yourself before you actually know anything about a topic. I know, this sounds completely backwards. Why on earth would you test yourself on things you haven't even read yet?
Well, research shows that we remember things so much better when we first struggle to recall them. Spending just 2 minutes trying to guess the answers tells your brain, hey, this is important, keep searching. Just like our ancestors scanning the horizon for a predator, your brain learns best when it's forced into an active searching state. Which brings us smoothly to step 2, connect, anchoring the flow.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept. Think of it this way. If raindrops fall on bone-dry ground, which represents your brain trying to learn isolated, rigid academic facts, they just evaporate and wash away. Poof, gone. That's exactly why you forget everything the minute you walk out of the exam room. But if those raindrops fall into a flowing river, they strengthen the flow and become part of a much greater system. The new information physically anchors into what's already there in your head.
So how do we deliberately create this flowing river? Well, you spend 3 minutes intentionally connecting. Turn those cold facts into feelings. Link the information to a personal story. Tie it to a future outcome that directly affects you. Or try asking yourself a really high-stakes question like, how could this save a life? Some memories burn into our minds permanently, like the harsh words from Henry's chemistry teacher, because they're intimately tied to deep emotion. By intentionally tying raw data to personal relevance, you guarantee it doesn't just evaporate. Finally, we hit step 3, transform, reshaping the network. To truly lock this all in, you must adapt to the knowledge. You have to take it from a linear, boring book structure and turn it into a real, living network. Think about our ancestors again for a second. When they figured out a new hunting strategy, they didn't just passively memorize a bulleted list. No way. They adapted to it. They built rituals around it. They told stories about it around the campfire. They seamlessly turned raw external experiences into internalized survival instincts. And that is exactly what we have to do with the information we study today.
So for the final 5 minutes of your cycle, you're going to start actively reshaping and reframing the facts. Build a visual flow. Actually draw a map to change your perspective. And look, even if you can't draw to save your life, force yourself to physically map out the concepts. Move them out of those linear bullet points you read in a textbook and visually map how they relate to one another on a piece of paper. You are literally guiding the flow of the river. This active transformation is what takes knowledge from being just an external fact to becoming a permanent, integrated part of who you are.
Looking back at that younger version of himself, sitting powerless and totally discouraged in that classroom, Henry had a deeply empathetic message. He said, "Dear Henry, your brain was never broken. It was never the problem. The real problem was a system that made him believe he just wasn't enough. Your mind is powerful beyond measure. Seriously, it was built to adapt, to grow, and to thrive. You aren't limited by your genetics or by talent or by what some teacher once told you. The only real limit is the belief that you even have one." So it's time to prove them all wrong. Stop fighting the natural biology of your brain with those outdated, industrial-era study habits. Start riding the currents of your own mind. Use the river method to recall, connect, and transform what you learn. Think about your own learning journey right now. What outdated system are you still letting dictate your potential? It's time to stop fighting the current and start writing your own. So ask yourself, what if the only thing standing between you and absolute mastery is just 10 minutes of biology today?